Hey everybody, this is Eric Johnson. I'm going to talk about something today that, before I go any further, I do want to say one thing. About a month ago, I had promised a couple of people, or I had told a couple of people I was about to come out with a video within a couple of days. They had private messaged me, and I did not. I did. Well, I did. I did a two-parter. I put it up on YouTube. It was literally in private, and I was about to publicize it. I got cold feet about what I was saying. I deleted it. So to those people who felt like I was kind of full of it, I did actually do the videos. I just got cold feet about what I was saying, and I didn't do it. And so here we are a month later, and I'm doing one. So sorry about that. Okay, here's the thing. I have found something out about one chapter in one book that if I'm not right, then I don't know what if I'm not right, I don't understand what this particular part of the chapter meant. But it really opened my eyes up to something that maybe complicates the chase for people, but I figure any insight's a good insight, right, into how Forrest Fenn thinks. So I'm going with it as a positive video. Yes, if I'm wrong, then it's just totally misleading, but on the other hand, why would it be wrong? Because otherwise, what is Forrest Fenn even talking about? Before I confuse this anymore and muddle it up anymore, I'm going to go straight to the point. We're talking about, take a good look at this photo. Right? That's a pretty weird photo. I mean not a photo, it's a drawing. This is chapter 7 in Too Far to Walk. This is Forrest Fenn's second book. I've only read 2 of his books, Thrill the Chase and Too Far to Walk. I really should get the others. I don't even remember their names right now. Once Upon a Time? Are there 3 of them or 4 of them? Doesn't really matter. I'm talking about chapter 7 today. Now you bear with me on this. Like I said, it's going to get into a certain area where some of you are going to go, that's pretty weird, but you have to realize I'm 66 years old, folks. I'm an old guy, okay? So things that some of the younger people see, they're going to go, I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't even care, okay? But for someone like me, who is 20 years younger than Fenn, so I'm kind of in his time space, growing up. I'm kind of aware of a lot of things in his life. How would that work? If he's 87 or 8 and I'm 20 years younger, how does that work? If I encompass 3/5 of his life, something like that, 4/5 of his life, 4/5 of his life, I've been alive. Whether I've been aware is another thing of his life. We've shared a lot of experiences growing up. Obviously, I was not around to really share or understand. He was born in 30, Fenn was, so we're talking 30 to 40 to 50. I was born in 50, basically 1954. I was born in December of 53. So I missed the first 20 years of his life. But then from then on, I was aware of a lot of stuff in his life that he was aware of. We're all aware of the same things. This will make sense in a second. This is such an unusual chapter to me. Chapter 7 in Too Far to Walk. Excuse me, folks. Okay, what is this chapter about? This chapter is about Forrest Fenn wanting to take his football coach, IIWII. That was his football coach. Fenn, by his own admission, was the star quarterback of the B team football team in his hometown, and he was the 98-pound quarterback for the Temple Wildcat. IIWII, my high school football coach, I was the star 98-pound quarterback for the Temple Wildcat B team. They were called the Kittens. This football team that Fenn was on, he was the quarterback of. IIWII was his football coach. He really got along with IIWII. His father liked IIWII. They all liked IIWII. IIWII is getting to an advanced age. He was having trouble walking. They did not know it at the time he had Parkinson's. So he goes to Forrest Fenn and he says, "Hey, Forrest, remember, you know that spot that we love to go on Grebe Lake in Yellowstone? Keeping in mind, this is my prime area that I'm in. I'm in the Madison River outside of Yellowstone." By the way, I want to make something else clear that I screwed up on recently. I said that that I was kind of tired this year and I didn't want to go for another trip out there in the latter part of this year because I'd already been out there since 2017 5 times. Actually, I was in Colorado and Utah 3 times. But I wasn't out there 5 times since 2017. I was out there 6 times. I was out there twice in 2017. I was in Colorado. In 2018, I was out there 3 times. 1 week I got snowed in when I was trying to go into Dinosaur National Monument in Colorado. And I ended up spending an entire week in Vernal, Utah, which is a really cool western town. It's one of the few towns in Utah settled by non-Mormon Westerners at the time. I mean, it's a real western town. It's got a war memorial, but it's got dinosaur stuff because that's dinosaur country, and it's got western stuff, and so craft shops and saddles and all that stuff. It's a real western town. But so anyway, 6 times I was out on these trips. 2 times 2017, 3 times 2018, the beginning of this year. I'm going out next year, but I was just plumb tired. That's why I copped out on going this in the later part of this year. I just felt that was important to say because I can't keep things straight and it irritates me. And so when I can keep them straight, I like to correct things. Okay, back to the story. Concy Wood says, "I want to go out to Grebe Lake. We used to have this wonderful camping spot we would stay in on the side of Grebe Lake. It's a 150-acre lake in Yellowstone." And Forrest Fenn says, "Wonderful. I will take you back to this lake where both he and his father and Concy Wood had gone before." It's going to be Forrest and Concy. Before Concy couldn't walk around anymore at all. So, Forrest Fenn alerts the Forest Service, Yellowstone, and they say, and he wants to drive his friend in. There's a gate, and then it's 3 miles in to get to this area. And Forrest Fenn writes, he says, "Look, I know we're not supposed to drive in there, but can we get a special medical waiver so I can drive my friend in because he has a medical problem?" And they say no. So Forrest Fenn decides, being Forrest Fenn, that he will actually ride Concy Wood in on a bicycle. Forrest Fenn pushed him while Concy rode, and you can imagine 3 miles on a dirt road or gravel road. That had to be rough, but he did it. So hats off to Forrest Fenn. So what happens? While they're going into, this is where the story gets weird. Bear with me. And I'd really be interested to know from comments how many people picked up on what I'm talking about and thought, I would really be interested to know how many people picked up on the strangeness of this story that I'm about to get into. Because it's strange any way you look at it. So Forrest Fenn is pushing Concy Wood in a bicycle, and in comes this big limousine, black limousine they have to get out of the way for that goes by them. Obviously, this person, whoever they are, have been able to get permission to drive in. Which, although Fenn doesn't actually mention it out loud, you would assume it's part of his irritation that we see later, that otherwise would be somewhat unexplained, because to me it was kind of like, wow. All right. Forrest Fenn says, "So I went to plan B. I put Concy on my bicycle, blah, 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 pushing him down the sandy road. It was an arduous task. I was young and vigorous. After 3 or 4 hours, we moved aside so a portentous black limousine could pass. I watched in awe because it looked so out of place, stands out. Why am I saying stands out? Because I have come to believe that this very whole thing is about things that stand out, things that are out of place. The blaze stands out. Things you read stand out. Look for things that don't fit. Look for things that stand out. Look for things that are weird. Look for things that don't make sense when you're reading these books. Don't look at the poem for the stands out bit. The whole poem kind of stands out because it's a short but kind of quirky poem. But when you're reading these books, I have come to understand how important these books are. And of course, when Thrill the Chase came out, the first one, it was a bunch of stories with a little poem. And that poem has grown to be, I think we have it backwards. I think when Forrest Fenn says things like, if people have, there's something they miss, or there's something that's backwards, I think part of it is these books, to me, are more important than the poem. The poem's very important because the poem is almost like the spine of the story. You can't have the story without that skeletal structure. But these books and these stories are what's important. When you're reading these books and these stories, look for weird shit. The weird shit is what's important. Things he left out. Things he misspells. Things that don't fit in. I know I'm repeating myself, but I'm just telling you folks, this is it. What is the blaze? The blaze is something that stands out. We're thinking of things like the blaze as a sign. I used to say that. Oh, the blaze is probably a sign. The blaze isn't a sign. Does a sign stand out? Think about it. Does a sign stand out? Now, maybe if you're looking at a field of grass and out in the middle of the field of grass, you see a little tiny sign, you go, wow, that's weird. That stands out. Okay, you go out in this big field of, 5 acres, and you see a little, you go read it. It says, welcome to, you found the blaze. In our real lives, when we see signs, to me, that is anything but the blaze now. You're not going to walk up, to me, I'm not going to walk up and go, oh, look, that's really an interesting sign, because the signs don't stand out. Signs are meant to stand out, so they don't stand out. The blaze is something that stands out. Okay, this to me is already a weird story, right? Fenn's going into Yellowstone to an area that he is not supposed to be able to drive into. And someone has gotten permission to drive in, and not only that, they are in, now you have to figure, this is Fenn in his teenage years. Fenn in his he says, my early teenage years. Now I don't know if you read that early teenage years or my early years, teenage years. You never know with Fenn. I have taken it to mean his teenage years in general, because it fits my story. And you'll see why in a minute. But regardless, it all fits my story, my thought process, my pattern. Okay? So, when Concy and I arrive at the lake an hour or so later, the best camping spot was occupied by a large tent. 4 men wearing 3-piece suits. This is Yellowstone. This is Grebe Lake in Yellowstone. An outdoor wilderness area for all intents and purposes. 4 men wearing 3-piece suits and patent leather shoes were standing around talking and probably expounding on how wonderful it was to be out in their wonderful national park and away from the rigors of Washington. Did anybody pick up on that? When you read things like this that Forrest Fenn writes, there's a tendency almost to glaze over them because they just don't fit. They don't fit the logic. First time I read this, I kind of did that. Then the second time I read it, I went, Washington? Does he mean Washington State? How does he know they're from Washington State? A big black limousine with blackened windows. This would have been when Fenn was a teenager. He was a teenager from 43 to 1950. So this would have been anywhere from 1944 to 1950 when he was a teenager, because he says my early years as a teenager. What does he say? He says, this is important to me. I thought a lot about it. When I was a young teenager. I just read it to mean when he was young, i.e. a teenager. Not 10, a teenager. When I was a young teenager. Well, he was born in 30, so from 33, or rather from 43 to 50, he was a teenager for all intents and purposes, right? Okay. Four men are standing around three-piece suits and patent leather shoes, probably expounding on how wonderful it was to be out in a national park away from the rigors of Washington. How does he know that? What is he talking about? We can't skip stuff like that. There's a reason Forrest Fenn said these people were from Washington. There's only two Washingtons that are in the normal vernacular for a story in this country. Washington State or Washington, D.C. That's all I can think of. One of the finely suited men was wearing white sneakers. He must have been the leader. Did you pick up on something that just happened? Forrest Fenn very clearly, do I sound like I'm kind of loud? It's because I'm excited. I'm starting to understand things about how Forrest Fenn does things, and it gets me excited about figuring out this poem and these books. He makes a point of discussing shoes. It's subtle, but he does it. If you're alert, he said right then, 4 men wearing three-piece suits and patent leather shoes were standing around. Then he says, one of the finely suited men, he has just said 4 finely suited men wearing patent leather shoes. He says one of the finely suited men was wearing white sneakers. He must have been the leader. 4 men, all wearing white patent leather shoes. One of the 4 men is now wearing white sneakers. Boom! Stands out. Weird. I don't think much Fenn writes is by accident, folks. He has made it very clear to us. Excuse me.